Welcome to the Five Flavors of Happiness, hosted by Susan Piper.
Hey guys, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning into the Five Flavors. I feel like I have been gone and I've missed you for weeks. This is the first podcast in 2025, and I am so excited because it's going to be a really good one. I have somebody here who is not only a former teacher, but the author of the Christmas Tree-jects. It's this amazing book. And I know you're going to think, like, why is she doing a Christmas book? It's January. We passed Christmas. Guys, this book is so profound and it has so many life lessons that you could thread throughout the year. And I just thought we have to unpack this. So, here with me is the author of this amazing book and my cousin, Bobby DeRosa.
Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This is a relatively short podcast, so I'm just going to dive right in.
Sure.
So, for me, one of the big takeaways was bullying, but you kind of turned it around a little bit. And when the trees are talking to each other, the one says, and I'm going to quote you directly because I thought it was really beautiful the way you worded it. And you said how the trees saw them, like the words that sting, as blessings in disguise. And I just thought that I've never, ever heard anyone talk about bullying like that. And you said, each scar teaches me something about myself, and they tell my survival story. I just thought that was so beautiful and so deep. Could you talk to us about that?
Sure. I think everybody has an opinion of themselves and what kind of person they are. But we're all gonna in the book. The trees are personified and they talk to one another. And the main gist of the book are these are trees that don't look like the rest of the Christmas trees, and much like people. There's a lot of parallels between the trees and people, and how some of us look one way, some of us look another way, but there's no right way and there's no wrong way. So, um, unfortunately, in the book, the trees are being made fun of by other more perfect looking trees. And there's a lot, you're a parent, I'm a parent, and one of the hardest things to um, make peace with is if your child was being made fun of. And we could think back to peel it back another layer from when we were students and when we were in school, where there was always, and I don't care who you look, what you look like. I was thinner than most kids, so always had to hear, "You're not as strong. You're wimpy. You're this and you're that." And even though it sounds like trivial, but if you're told you're skinny and you're wimpy and stuff like that, when you're a 10-year-old, that really sticks with you. And like I could tell that to this day, I still have that in my mind. Like, I still will say to myself at times, "You're too thin. You're too thin. You're." I'm almost like repeating what bullies said when I was 10 years old. So what does it do? It teaches you about yourself. It's a blessing in disguise, because it's really a blessing to really know who you are. I think a lot of us think we're a person or a type of person, but you don't really know, maybe. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but um, the blessing in disguise part is it tells your stories. It tells you who you are. What kind of person are you? Are you the kind of person that can overcome the bullying? Are you the kind of person that locks their door and says, "I'm never leaving the house again"? People scare me. I'm intimidated. So I like knowing who I am. I like knowing the value I put on myself. I find it helps me be a better parent. It helps me be a better person to know that, yeah, life wasn't perfect and you took a few arrows, but guess what? You survived those arrows. just the other day, my son and I were talking, and I mentioned to him, he's 14 years old, and I mentioned to him, I said, you're really mentally strong. And he looked at me, he was like, You think I'm mentally strong? I said, Of course I do. His name is Dean. And I said, Dean, you've been in 4 schools in 5 years due to COVID. And he went from Catholic school to public school when he went to middle school. I said, adults don't want to switch or careers. They'll stay in one career because they fear what's it going to be like to start over. So telling him that you're mentally strong, and I saw his reaction. His reaction was that of maybe he didn't think he was mentally strong, but I wanted him to know you took those arrows. You have some scars now because each school that you started in, you have to start over. You have to make new friends. Some friends are nice, some friends are not nice. So he took it, and what I told him was, I want you to carry that throughout your life. So whenever you do take a couple of more arrows, and you will, and that's why I kept stressing to him. I said it's not a just this wonderful ascent to bliss. I said you're going to take more arrows in your life. When that happens, I want you to draw back on those experiences, and I want you to say, I was like a 10-year-old and I survived it. Now I'm a 20-year-old. Now I'm a 40-year-old. Now I'm a 60-year-old. If I got through that when I was 10 and I was strong enough to do it then, how much easier is it going to be later in life? So teaching yourself, that it is a blessing in disguise, because if you have, and God bless, if you have such a perfect life where maybe those arrows don't make their way to you, and great, that's a great thing. But then are you going to be equipped later in life, because inevitably you will have to deal with some type of adversity? And are you going to be equipped, or is it better to start to build that I don't want to say jadedness, just to have the defense mechanisms in place so that when it does happen, you could draw back on past experiences and say, I got through that. And now this is nothing. Like if I was a 10-year-old and can do it, of course I could do this. I could switch careers. I can go to a new place of business and walk in, and it's going to be a little nerve-wracking. You walk in, no one knows you and everyone's looking at you, but you did that 5 times in such a short amount of time. Now it's easy. So, is it a blessing in disguise? You can look at anything as you can say this is terrible, this is terrible. But I think it's better to choose to say, what did I learn from that experience? What did that teach me about myself? I now know I have the skill set. My toolbox is full. The next time this happens, no problem. I got this. So that's kind of what I meant by that.
I love that, and I can't imagine anyone listening who's never had an arrow.
Of course, of course.
I think it's just part of the human experience, but you worded it so beautifully, and I wanna dive into Dean,
Sure,
because
sure.
your introduction also talks about another big theme, and you said it in 3 little words. You said, "You're never alone."
Yes.
And it's just 3 little words, but it's so profound because loneliness and it hits kids, it hits adults, it might hit seniors a little bit more acutely, but it's this huge, profound theme in life. And your characters had to navigate being lonely at different stages in life. Talk to us about Danny's loneliness and also the synchronicities, because I loved the synchronicities, and, just tell me about it because it was fabulous.
So thank you. So being alone, as you said, maybe be harder than any arrow you're going to take. Not being accepted, whether it is you're physically alone, and I think that is astute to say many seniors now at a certain point, whether their spouse has passed, their children have moved on, live somewhere far away, that's a tough one. Especially we just went through the last 6 weeks or so of the holiday season, that's gotta be difficult. But I I think it's even worse to walk into a room and have nobody even notice you. And what is that like what is it like? And that goes back to my son going from school to school, and me saying, "You're mentally strong. You got through that," because that wasn't the case for me. Like when we were kids, I went to one elementary school for whatever, 6, 7 years. Then you go to middle school, then you go to high school, and a lot of the same people follow you from all those schools. And really, the first chance that I had to start anew would be college when I went off to college. So, but to be a child and to walk in and go to the lunch table and nobody is saying, "Hey, come on over here." That's not an easy thing, especially when it happens day after day after day. So there's also like the little more depressing or sad part of this was when I wrote this book, it was written because there was a couple reasons, but I was very sick for a couple of years. I was having headaches. I went to get an MRI. They found that I had MS and a benign brain tumor. And at the time, the MS, I feel much stronger today, but at this time, it was bad, and I was not sure what my future, if I even had a future. Um, especially when words like brain tumor are presented to you. So when I wrote this book, my gravest fear, or I'm sorry, prior to the writing of the book, one of my biggest fears, and I know every parent feels this way, but my son and I are very close and we do everything together. And I was what if factor? Well, what happens if the brain tumor, thank God, was benign, but they told me it's benign, but we have to check it 3 times a year because it could turn cancerous. And some people survive brain cancer, some people do not survive brain cancer. And all that kept going through my mind is, "Wh- what's going to happen to my son?" And I know my wife is there and there's a support system. Um, but some of the motivation for the book was a little bit of a guidebook on what to do if I'm gone. And I wanted him, whether or not this is, it's fiction. The book is fiction. We have talking trees. So, um, but when you're writing fiction, you can go in any direction that you want to go in. So I chose to write and believe that I would still be in his life in some way, and I wanted him to know that I saw his face when I was at my worst, when I was sick, when nurses were coming to the house and I had IVs and walking around the house with an IV drip and stuff like that. I saw his face and I saw fear, more fear in his eyes than were in my own. But um, I just I wanted him to believe, and I do believe that if I was taken away, that God would see it fit to still have me somehow in his life. So in the book, there is a reveal about a dog that happens early in the book and then comes back at the very end of the book. Um, I'm working on another book right now where through there's some similarities where the protagonist is talking to a loved one who's in heaven, but doesn't know he's talking to a loved one that's in heaven via the video game that he's playing. So they're communicating online in this video game. But again, I want my son, and I hope it's my hope. So nobody knows, but it's my hope that um, God would see it fit that I would still be able to be in contact in some way. I understand I'm not going to come back and sit down next to him and talk to him, but in some way that I could still be there when he is in need of guidance, when he's asking, that he would have this conviction that the words aren't just going into the ether. Like, dad really does hear me. Dad's listening. And I, maybe through the Holy Spirit, I'm hearing it back. And I that little voice in your head, maybe that's dad telling me to go left when I thought I should have gone right. So some of the book, the motivation for the book was I wanted Dean to know that you're never alone. And now I know I believe in my faith that you aren't alone. So even if you are physically alone, you do have God. You do have um, someone's listening to you. And in addition to that, I wanted him to know that I would still be there in every way possible. And we even talked, and I told him once, I think my exact words to him were, when if I'm in heaven, I don't want to be up there stringing a harp with the angels. I hope God lets me kind of help down here in some way, helping you, helping mom, helping all of our loved ones, and helping mankind in some way. Now, again, who knows? But when you're writing a fictitious book, you could take it in any direction. But there was a little hint of, Dean, this is the guidebook. I want you to know that I'll still be there in one way or another.
Wow, that's absolutely beautiful. And it segues perfectly into our next question. And it's about belief.
Mhm.
Because the book is deeply spiritual. Um, and you talk about having faith and you say it's so easy when things are good. And when things aren't good, like your illness or the devastating fires in California, like how do you manage? Do you have any words of advice to give to people? Like, how did you get through that and maintain your faith? Because I would imagine you have ups and downs,
Yes.
right? I
100.
mean, we're human.
You're
Like, there are days.
yeah.
How did you do it?
So it was not an easy process, and anybody who does question God, the people who are dealing in California right now with fires, losing everything that you own, which is sometimes when you think about it, you know, that's a near impossible thing to digest. So for me personally, when I was sick, um, and it took a couple of years to get back on my feet. Um, I was first the first emotion was anger. And anger at God, to be totally honest with you. I know that's wrong, but that's the truth. I'm working as a special ed teacher in an urban environment with mostly boys that have no father, that have no positive role models, male role models in their lives. Um, And those kids counted on me in a huge way. I know it was not the typical go to work teaching job. First of all, I never felt like it was work. I loved every second of it. I loved being there. It felt like not only am I earning a living, I'm making the world a better place. And really with no effort. Just the effort was just being compassionate, empathetic, and letting those kids know that I cared about them immensely, and I wanted you got a tough life. I used to tell them, there is no way around it. You were dealt a tough hand. What are you gonna do with it? You're gonna repeat the same mistakes that maybe your parents made? Or you going to or are you going to say, I demand better for myself. I demand better for one day when I'm an adult. Am I gonna repeat those same mistakes that, you know, got those children into that spot? So in my mind, it was like, God, what are you doing? Why would you take me from there? And I could not understand it. Then COVID hit, and my son, he's got a brilliant mind. He absolutely sees the world differently than I see it, but better than I see it. He problem solves on a level that I'm in awe of. He's in advanced science classes and math classes. The fact that what he's doing in eighth grade I did in 12th grade, nowhere near at the level of success that he's having, I had. It's really amazing to me. However, he also has ADHD, and as an educator, ADHD gets thrown around a lot. Sometimes, there's a difference between a kid who talks too much, and someone who truly, really is suffering from this. So, um, COVID is the worst in New Jersey. I know around most of the country, but in New Jersey, having remote learning, this was the worst possible situation for him to be in. He is now somebody who struggled to stay focused. And now you're telling him sit at the kitchen island on a laptop for about 6 hours a day, listening to sometimes dry lessons, and do well. You also have to do well. So because I was home at the time, I actually sat on the other side of the island, and um, I felt like my role was in that situation was to kind of keep him centered, keep him focused, played cheerleader, played tutor. When something was assigned that was difficult, I would like slide my phone to him and say, like, take a picture of the screen and then slide it back so like the teacher doesn't see it. And then I could see it and say, okay, we got this. Don't worry. Don't panic. Like, I'm gonna help you get through this. So for me, one day in the midst of all that, my anger toward God for taking me away from my students, I said, it was like an aha moment where I said, those students needed me, but my son needed me more. And I'm not saying God gave me MS and a brain tumor. He didn't do that. But he also put me in a position where I was home and I was able to spend 2 years helping him to the best of my ability and getting him through what was a very difficult situation where I truly believe that some students suffered this much and some suffered that much. There were definitely students who can handle it and say, it's not ideal, but I'm not going to lose too much, and some are going to lose a lot, and some of that would not be recoverable because the way education is, you go to the next grade, they don't go backwards. Fourth grade isn't teaching third grade, fifth's not teaching fourth. So I knew what was happening was he needed it in the worst possible way. So whenever someone is struggling with the why would you do this to me? Why would you take a loved one from me? Why would you get me fired? Why would any of those things? Like I don't believe God does any of those things to punish anybody, but I do say search for the why. There is one. If you can kind of divorce yourself from your own situation and take a step back and look and say, why am I in this situation? What possible good came of it? So now you mentioned the people in California, those fires. I had no idea what their why is, but possibly there's a better life for them somewhere else, in a different house, in a new house. Possibly people are going to say, I don't want to be in California anymore. I'm moving to Northern California. I'm going somewhere else. And maybe that somewhere else is going to be where that 12-year-old kid is going to grow up and meet the love of their life, who is the best human being that they could have ever been matched with. And maybe the why you don't find out in year one. Maybe you find out in year 21, but you can look back and say, you know what? Had I stayed in California, I never would have met this person, and that person saved me. That person, as a human being, like maybe some other way they save you, but maybe just as a human being, maybe you were going to go down a path that you would not have been ideal for you. So I don't know why. No one knows why, but if you search, I feel like at some point, and you're receptive to signs that are maybe around you that are sometimes hard to see, sometimes you don't want to see, sometimes you're so angry at the time you can't see. But at some point, I'm confident that if you're looking, you'll find out your why. For me, it was now I can help my son who needs me more than anybody on this planet right now. And that's my why, and it's comforting. It helps to know. It just helps to make peace with things.
That's awesome. And I like everybody else, you have your struggles, and I always like you, I get angry when I'm having my struggles, but then, a few months go by and maybe you change the job, maybe you've gotten out of it for some way, then you're able to look back and see in hindsight and go, "Oh wow, I'm happy that happened. Yeah, it sucked. I hated it. I hated every minute of going through it, but I never would have gotten here if I didn't do that." So, completely get it. But I want to talk about purpose because you mentioned your work and your work what you said that you never felt like it was work and that you love being with those kids every day, and to me, that feels like a divine purpose, and the trees talk about that too, and, they say Connie says, and I have to quote you, "The lucky ones figure out their divine purpose early on. Some can't see it even when the clues are right in front of their pine cones." Um Talk to me about finding purpose.
So finding purpose obviously is going to be defined differently by different individuals. I couldn't tell somebody what anybody's purpose is, but I can say there were jobs that paid more than being a special ed teacher. Um, I don't know how many jobs I could have gone into that would have felt as good as teaching and doing what I was doing. So to find one's purpose, I think it's a tough one. It's a tough question. It's because I think it's defined differently by everybody. But you know the expression like if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. True to an extent, because not every profession pays the bills. Some, you still have to eat and you still have to have a roof over your head, right? So sometimes you really need um possibly a job that's not your purpose, but that doesn't have to define you. Your career doesn't have to define you. So find that thing that does maybe define you, that isn't your purpose. Possibly it's podcasting, possibly it's writing a book. And I never thought to write a book. That was never even a goal. I never even, the way that all happened was kind of bizarre to me. We actually it was December 26th years ago, and we drove. My son was about 5 or 6 years old, and we drove by a tree lot. So it's the day after Christmas, and there are 4 or 5 trees that are thrown to the curb, like for pickup. And from the back seat, my son goes, what about those trees? What's going to happen to them?" And I'm thinking, how do I say, like, they're gonna be in the trash heap, like, they're going to a landfill or something, but I didn't wanna say that, so I gave him, you know, the nicest answer I could possibly give him. I told him something along the lines of the trees, they'll be rewarded for this ultimate sacrifice that they're making. And my wife looks at me and goes, "That sounds like a book." And I said, "Yeah, it kind of does." And she goes, "You should write it." And I'm like, I've never written a book. I never even like thought about writing a book. But that came to uh that happened because when I was sick, I did not feel comfortable with my son coming home from school every day, seeing his father on a couch. I needed him to know that, you're gonna get knocked down. Get up and figure it out. And I was struggling walking. I was struggling with a lot of things, but I was able to sit with a laptop on my lap and write. So possibly the purpose that I found was writing. And if one person read that book and said, "You know what? I'm not alone," then great. If something were to happen to me and my son had the book to go back to look and see, I think dad put some lessons in there. Um, Great. So I think everyone's purpose is going to be different, and it doesn't have to be your career. It's not, and sometimes it's not something you set out for. Sometimes it finds you, and you could just again, be receptive to that and recognize that um you're gonna your job that I it's big with me. Like your job does not have to define you. A lot of people it defines them. And I understand it's necessary. They have to dedicate a lot of time to that profession, but there's a lot of other aspects of life that's, maybe you miss out on that. So to find one's purpose, it doesn't have to be your career, and it can be something that you never thought was going to happen. It finds you.
I love that. And I think we do so much of the time. We equate our purpose with your 9 to 5 when it doesn't have to be. It could be something completely different. I have one last question,
Yeah.
and I know we've been talking so much, and I love it, but I don't want to keep you too long. My last question, and this was, I'm going to quote you again. Uh, you say, because this one I have a really hard time with this. I want to actually take this quote and put it by my desk. I didn't let evil tempt me into doing evil. Because sometimes I wanna retaliate. Like, if somebody does something, I'm like, "Oh, yeah? Well, to you too." And, oh my god, how do you not retaliate? How do you let it go and stay on the high ground and not go low because 'cause they're going low? What advice do you have?
Okay. It's not something that I perfected in my life in any way, because the temptation to go low is always there. I tell my son,
Mm.
like, my default setting, I have to reject the default setting of a lot of things and say gonna that's not gonna be beneficial or helpful to anybody. So, in the book, the trees are being really heavily ridiculed. And at one point, Connie, one of the main characters, who's a tree, um, she helps out her number one tormentor. And some of the other trees are like, why would you do that? Like, you didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to hurt her, but you certainly didn't have to help her. So, I like the thought of helping somebody that wouldn't help you. Um, I think if the world would be a lot better place if people did that. But to not let that temptation get to you, I kind of feel like when you do, or I'll speak for myself, when I've done that, when somebody has wronged me, and I'm like, I'm gonna get that person back in some way. I'm gonna get that person back. When it's over, did I feel better? No, absolutely not. In fact, when I'm alone with my thoughts, I might feel ashamed of myself. I might say, "You're better than that, Bob. Like, why would you have said that? Why would you have done that?" So, so maybe in a millisecond, there was some vindication that you felt, but then you're going to feel worse or shame later on down the road. So you didn't win. You compounded the situation. You made it worse for yourself. Even if you felt like you were in the right and that you were justified. Another big thing, I'm going to give my wife credit for this. She's the one who instilled in me that, you don't judge. Like, it's not your place to judge. Like, maybe they did it or said it for their own reason. At some point, God will judge them, but you don't judge. Now, I get it. That's sometimes easy to hear, but to put into practice, very, very difficult. But I do feel like it's the right thing to do. It's the example I want to set for my son. And ultimately, the goal is to feel, if the goal is to, I was hurt and now I don't want to be hurt anymore. I want to take that hurt and put it aside. Well, don't compound the problem. Don't pile on. Don't fire back. Because really, let's think about it, right? Every time in your life and in mine, if somebody hurts you and you say something back, how many times did that person say, "Oh, you have a good point, and I was wrong"? No, they're gonna fire another arrow at you. So at what point, when does it stop? Like, it can never stop. Or at a certain point, it takes one person. And again, I'm stressing, it's not always me. Sometimes it's people in my life who are positive role models that I would try to emulate. But hopefully it is me more now than maybe years past. But um at some point it has to stop. Like, otherwise you will ultimately feel worse for that moment of vindication. You're gonna feel worse in the long run. So that's what I mean by don't let evil tempt you. I also feel like you're being tempted every single day. Every single day there's temptation. Every single day, no matter where I go, there's something at the end of my day. If I think about it, there was temptation here, there was temptation there. And I feel like those are tests. And sometimes you pass, sometimes you don't pass. But hopefully, the older you get and the more arrows you take, you learn from that and you pass more than you fail, and that's the goal.
Awesome. Okay, last question. I'm sorry. I know I said that was the last question,
Mm.
but I have to ask you, do you because the synchronicities in the book, to me, that's like God or the universe whispering to us what our path is, and they're like miracles.
Yes.
Do you believe that there are little miracles that happen in our life all the time?
I 100% believe that there are miracles that are happening all around us. I think that we collectively are sometimes unable to see them, and myself included, but they're there. And when I think of um my wife and I come from very different backgrounds, and it almost doesn't make any sense that her and I got together and married, and we've been together 22 years, and raising our son and just living life together. And like the again, like how did we connect? And the fact that the universe kind of put us together is is a miracle. And I give her credit for making my faith a lot stronger than it ever was when I was younger. I would say I was like a lot of Catholic people. I was a Christmas Easter Catholic, and after that I didn't really think about it all that much. I was maybe way more consumed in superficialities of my own life and stuff like that. So when I met my wife and she's telling me, when we were in the getting to know each other phase, and she's telling me she's going on mission trips to parts of the world that needed help, I'm thinking, "Oh my goodness. I'm hanging out with my friends when I'm 21, 22 years old in a bar, playing darts, and she's building churches and homes for impoverished people." So the fact that her and I got together, was it a miracle? It definitely lifted me into a place that I don't know if I would have ever ascended to if had I not met her. When I was working as a special ed teacher, one day they said, "Hey, you have a new teacher's aide." And some woman comes walking in who, um, seemingly a nice person, and we ended up she was in my classroom for over a decade, and every day she gave me she was a very religious, very spiritual person, and every day she would give me like a little nugget of wisdom. Or sometimes, and there's an interesting dynamic in teaching where a lot of teachers don't want the teacher's aide to tell them almost anything. It's like, I'm the teacher, I know what I'm doing. But I, she would sometimes, after the fact, whisper something to me and say, think about X, think about Y or something. And she also taught me, she would always tell me, I'm not afraid to die. Like I'm doing everything I can on this earth to make my children's life better, my grandchildren's life better, but I'm certainly not afraid to die, which kind of blew my mind because I'm thinking, like, how could you not be afraid to die? Like, the mystery of what happens to us and stuff like that. But why did she come walking into my room that day? Like was that why did Danny have a dog knock him over in the book? It was his father. So why did her name is Zarina. Why did Zarina come walking into my life? Why did my wife Erica and I connect when we lived an hour plus apart? There's a lot of we live, New Jersey, densely populated, plenty of people in the dating pool that you could have dated who live 5 minutes from your house. And here I am driving an hour and a half into the country dating this woman, thinking like at first I'm like, what am I doing? But religion was a focal point for her, and Zarina, the teacher's aide, who I love dearly, and was was something that I'm so happy happened in my life. So now, is there are we going to witness, water to wine, and are you going to go to the park and on the pond you're going to see somebody walking across the water? Probably not. But I do think if you start again, take that step back, kind of like look around, like, open your eyes up and to your own life and say, what, like, why was that person put in my path? Why did, you know, how did we connect? And think about maybe why your life is better for having that person in your life. Well, then you could say it's just a random coincidence, or you could say that was God working his magic. And that's a miracle in my book. So I absolutely believe it's happening all around us. And I gave a couple of examples, and I'm sure there's, more. And I think those examples are different for everybody. But yes, it's happening. You just have to really look for it, but it's happening.
Awesome. I'm right there with you. I totally believe in miracles, and I think sometimes every conversation, there's always something like my conversation with you. I get a little bit of a nugget of wisdom that I'll take, and hopefully somebody else will too. I just think all the people we meet teach us something along the way, and I feel like that like, I'm so lucky that people are in my life for the journey. But the
Sure.
last part of the podcast I
Okay.
wanna do with you, it's the fast round.
Okay.
I just asked 5 really quick questions, and you give me one-word answers. It's just fun.
Okay. I'll try to do.
I I am happiest when
I don't know if I could do one word. On Friday, on a Friday night, ordering takeout, bottle of wine with my wife, knowing that once dinner is over, then my son and I are gonna do whatever, play video games, watch a movie, something like that's where I'm at my happiest.
that's awesome. Love the bottle of wine part. Uh, the best way with a little bit of cheese, and then I'd be happy. Uh, the best way to find happiness is
Don't look for it. I think if you're searching, it's, you might not find it. Let it find you. It's going to find you.
awesome. If happiness was a place, where would it be?
My home.
Beautiful. What one piece of advice would you give your younger self?
Let some of that blank go. Don't let it just eat and fester and fester and fester. It gets better. Life gets better.
It does, right?
Yeah.
I wish I could tell my little self that.
Yes.
Um, okay, last question. Now, in the book, I kind of know what it is, but when you said takeout, no, I'm thinking, I don't know. If happiness was actually a food, what would it be?
Are you thinking meatballs? Like
Yes,
look,
yes.
no. Okay. So anyone who's listening, Susan and I have the same grandmother, and I lived in the as my grandmother. She was on the first floor. We were on the third floor, and my bedroom was essentially like above grandma's kitchen. And I would smell her meatballs, and I'm laughing, but it always stuck with me as such a like a happy moment because when I would wake up, there's a line in there that says, "I don't know, like meatballs for breakfast." That sounds like a weird thing.
Yeah,
I would wake
yeah.
up and I would go downstairs, and Grandma would put two meatballs aside for me, and I'm eating that while everyone else is eating Lucky Charms or scrambled eggs. I was eating meatballs. So even though that's a part of the book, and that is like I loved everything about that. But wait, if happiness is a food, I'm gonna go a little more exotic and say I love Thai food. Um,
Oh.
a Thai papaya salad with a chili lime dressing when my tongue is doing this like spicy tingling sensation. I love
Oh.
everything about that.
Oh my god, I would never have guessed that. Ever. An Italian boy from New Jersey. What the heck?
My mother and I were talking about meatballs yesterday, so
Thank you so much for being on the show, and you gotta come back when your next book drops.
Will do.
And I gotta talk about it.
Thank you so much, Susan.
And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you made it to the end of the video, please like and subscribe. It helps me on the algorithm. And we will see you on the next episode of 5 Flavors of Happiness. Thanks, guys.